Good morning and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM, your home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make New Haven tick. No one makes New Haven tick more in good times and hard times like we're having now. The U.S. Representative Rosa DeLauro, who's busy both at home and in D.C., helping us cope with the spread of COVID-19. And she's generously made some time available this morning to join us on WNHH-FM. Rosa, thanks so much for zooming in with us.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. I really wanted to be here to be able to talk to folks or to listen to folks. Thank you.
We and Harry, you'll let us know if someone sends in any comments. A lot of times people watch this on delay, but we sometimes get people like last time you were here writing in journey. So Harry, if you'd like to post a question on Facebook Live, Harry will read it for us. Rosa, we have a lot of important issues to discuss about what you're doing in Congress, what you're doing in the district. But first of all, I would just like to continue something we asked before we went on air, which is how you're feeling and how you're doing.
I'm doing fine. My family is fine. What we did, it was last Saturday, we did Zoom, and my kids know the technology better than I do, but we were able to see kids and grandkids and look at their faces and see how they're faring, and they're doing fine. So Stan and I are doing very, very well. Now, about you and your family, how is everyone? Okay?
We're well. My wife and I have been having a few Zoom dinners with our grandchild and his parents.
Right.
That's been kind of fun. A little weird.
But
fun.
It's fun. Wonderful fun. It is. He didn't want us to be our grandson, the littlest one, who was at 2.5. While he was sitting there eating his pasta, he said it was my pasta. I don't, he wasn't about to share with anyone.
One thing I'm trying to picture is, Rosa, when I think of you as an elected official, I think of how much I see you out hugging constituents, shaking hands, getting really close. You've been doing that for decades. What's it like now to represent the 3rd District when you can't be up close with your constituents that way?
Well, it really is. You characterize it right. I'm a hugger. The contact with people is so critically important to me, and it's not for my job. It's just for who I am. So it's been hard. It really has. But, and saying to myself, we have to deal with a new environment. And I say this to everyone who is out there, to your listeners, to be safe, to stay home, to keep your social distancing, to wash your hands, to do what they're telling you to do, because we've got to try to flatten this curve. But for me, personally, yeah, it has been hard. But you have to learn quickly here, because the best effort is to be safe and to keep others safe at the same time. That I will just tell you, hasn't stopped me from being in touch with conference calls, with teletown halls, of which we have done 2. But I was on the phone last week and this week by conference with our chiefs of police, our fire chiefs, our elected officials, health directors, the mayors, first selectmen, the business people, school superintendents, hospital heads, and people in the nonprofit community, our caregivers, and so I've tried to keep in touch really by teleconferencing with people to listen to the issues that they care about, and how we can respond, and what we might be able to do to put into these packages, these stimulus packages, the resources in order to address people's concerns.
Okay, Rosa, why don't we put on hold and get back to what you've been hearing? Because I did want to ask you about that, what you're hearing on the ground in the district. I'm informed my internet connection is a little bit unstable, so I'm hoping we're going to persevere here. There have been two bills you've passed in Congress, and now you're going back to DC tomorrow, I understand, before we went on the air, to speak on and vote on the biggest bill to date, which passed the Senate late last night, a $2 trillion rescue package. Please tell me what that's about and what position you're going to be taking, Rosa.
I will probably leave later this afternoon to drive down, Paul, just because I think we start on the floor of the House at 9 o'clock. Now, please understand that they have not called back everyone to do this. It's kind of up to individuals if they want to go. They're going to do this probably by what they say voice vote, so that not everyone has to be there. So I know I am going, and I know some of my other Connecticut colleagues are going as well.
So why are you going in person?
Well, because what I want to do is to be there. I want to listen to the debate, what debate that there will be. Also, hopeful that I will have a chance to speak, and I will speak. I have worked very, very hard over the last several weeks here in doing several things. I chair, as you know, the Appropriations Subcommittee on Labor, Education, and Health. That's one of the biggest pieces of the package that we are putting together, and that has to do with education issues, what's happening because you asked what I've heard. Our superintendents, our school people, they want to know how are they going to link up their students with the internet. What does this mean for all of that? On the health issues, what are the accessing the public, the protective equipment issues? What's happening with income assistance to families? I have worked on all of these efforts, including not only appropriations, but looking at how we deal with paid sick days, paid family and medical leave, how we deal with income assistance through a child tax credit, and what we're doing about food stamps. So I want to be there. I'm going to speak on this issue. It's just I'm hopeful that I will be able to speak on the issues and be there for a voice vote when that comes up.
And you're going to drive, you said, rather than fly. You usually fly, correct?
I usually take the train. We're going to drive down later this afternoon.
You do have one of the best drivers in the business. Not only good company, but he's got a lot of good experience. So I think you're going to be safe. You mentioned four things there, Rosa, that are relevant to the work you do day in and day out, chairing a subcommittee that focuses on labor, education, and health. Mm-hmm. You mentioned protections for health workers, which is a big issue now, as you know, better than anybody, about the lack of masks and other protective equipment. You mentioned what superintendents are saying, and we're hearing too, about concerns that up to 80% of kids in New Haven might not have access yet. They're getting them free Chromebooks to internet learning in the rest of this year. You talked about cash assistance, paid sick days, and food stamps. So what are the specifics? What are you able to get into this bill, and what should people look for?
Right. In terms of education, I'm looking at data because I don't want to give out wrong information to people. It's over $30 billion to support local school systems, higher education institutions. We've got almost $14 billion for elementary and secondary education grants, discretionary grants, student loan payments suspended for 6 months with no interest accrual, flexibility for students whose program eligibility would be affected by the coronavirus, flexibility for colleges and universities so that they can keep operating. In other parts of the bill, there is telehealth, teleworking, and how we're going to provide funding in order to address the specific issue that you spoke about, of making sure that the kids who do not have access to the internet will have access to the internet. And there will be funding in this package that allows for that to be done. You also asked about, let me just say, one of the biggest pieces of this bill is the unemployment insurance. And with that, we are looking at $600 a week in addition to other unemployment insurance benefits, so that we're trying to total it to provide 100% of a wage replacement for 4 months. That also would include a temporary program for part-time, for self-employed, for people who work in the gig economy, and others who are normally excluded from regular unemployment insurance benefits. And that will run through December 31st, 2020. So it's a really strong package of unemployment benefits for people. And I think that that's critical. Now, once this is passed, Paul, this is what I will do. We need to pass it in the House. It's passed in the Senate. But then what I will do is a teletown hall with the information so that people can call in and ask questions, and we give them the latest and updated information. There's also $360 million for worker training and support, and the costs at the Department of Labor for implementation. This is what is in the bill at the moment.
Okay, and we're talking with Rosa DeLauro, U.S. Representative from the 3rd Congressional District, that includes New Haven and all the towns around us. We're on Dateline New Haven at 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. We're talking about COVID-19 and the work she's doing in D.C. and in New Haven. You're driving down to D.C., Harry?
Paul, the comments are mounting up, questions and comments. Okay. Do you want me to read them?
Yes, please.
All right. Angela Maddie says hospitals have an immediate need for PPE.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then Phil Lustinator says, longtime fan of both of you. Any word on public testing throughout cities like New Haven, Waterbury, Bridgeport, and Hartford? Also, where does the state stand on relief for prisoners, paid video calls, and fresh food?
Thank you, folks, for listening. Thanks for the kind questions. Rosa, would you like to respond to some of those questions?
Yeah, let me do this. As far as I understand it, Harry, with regard to the incarcerated population, there's $100 million for the Bureau of Prisons for coronavirus prevention, preparation, and response. $850 million for the Burn Justice Assistance Grants for law enforcement and jails, again for preparation, response, including PPE, the equipment, and it allows for longer release to home confinement. That is what I know at the moment. I'm sure included in that is what we're doing about food and food security. The other piece was on the equipment. To be quite honest with you, this has been an area that has been so vexing, troublesome, and just where I've gotten angry about it. We just in terms of distribution, we have, and I'll be honest with you, we have been almost unable, so this members of Congress, unable to get information from the Strategic National Stockpile about what's in it, what they need, what they have, and what they need. But I do know that what we did in this bill, and I just want to double check for you. So if you bear with me, I'm trying to see what there is. By the way, the woman who called on the hospitals, there is $100 billion for hospitals. There is, in terms of the healthcare capacity, there's an additional $16 billion for the Strategic National Stockpile for personal protective equipment, for pharmaceuticals, and $3.5 billion to expand the production of vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics. So we are trying to provide all of the funds that they need. We just have to have the distribution of it. And I, like the governor of New York, and I'm sure our governor, I believe that we need to trigger that Defense Production Act, which says that these companies have got to produce and manufacture these products, and we will provide what capital investments they need in order to do it. It should have happened before. It needs to happen as quickly as possible, because I've heard, and you asked me what I've heard from our police, from our fire, from our healthcare workers. My God, they are reusing masks, and that cannot be the case. We owe it to the public, and we owe it to our first responders and our healthcare professionals to get what they need in order to do their job. On issue to public testing, it is my understanding, and if we can get you other information on this, is that with regard to public testing, I know that Yale has opened a facility at Sargent Drive. Bridgeport Hospital has. Other hospitals have made arrangements for people to drive through to get tested, so that we're increasing the opportunity for testing, including the number of test kits. I think that is ongoing ramping up in a very robust way.
Rosa DeLauro is joining us here on WNHH-FM. Harry Joyce, our station manager, is taking your questions. Rosa, you brought up something about distribution. So big part of your job is being in Washington, holding hearings, asking questions, passing laws. And obviously a big part of your job, and one reason you've been there so long, is constituent service. Back home, you have an office that people call when they need help with government. Boy, what a challenge you got now. A historic amount of money is going to be flowing from the federal government to communities, but it's going to be so hard, I think, for some individuals to access it. You mentioned gig workers. Good job getting them included in benefits. Thank you. You talked about protective equipment. You talked about money for online learning. How are we going to make sure in New Haven that money you've gotten flows into the right hands?
Yeah, well, that's a very, very big question. And that what we have to do is to deal with the oversight of this. And look, I am not at this moment, and I wish I could tell people exactly how you access all of these funds, right now. I don't want to give out, I figure the best information is accurate information to people. But that is coming with the passage of the legislation, the signing of the legislation. Then I view it as my job to make sure, as you said, that the money gets into the right hands, and that we are making sure that people know about how they can access the system for themselves and for their families. I will just say on one area, this $500 billion, which was initially put in by Senator McConnell, had a $5 billion fund, which we would not have known for 6 months what was being doled out, only by the Secretary of the Treasury, and not knowing where it was going. What we did in this package, what was done by the Senate and House Dems, is that it says, no, you can't do that. This is not a private slush fund, if you will. This is going to be, we're going to have a special inspector general, which will oversee how the money is being distributed.
I didn't know about that. Yeah.
Yes, that's in the bill. That's what was done by the Senate Democrats and the House Democrats. Said, no, you cannot just deal with this. And I will be specific. It includes, it's $500 billion in industry aid through the Federal Reserve, $25 billion for the airlines, $4 billion for cargo carriers, $17 billion for businesses that are important to our national security. Now, these are the conditions. These are the conditions, Paul, and your viewers, that Senate and House Dems put in place, because we know what happened with the TARP bailout. The big guys got bailed out, and people lost their homes, their equity, etc. And they haven't fully recovered. But the conditions that these folks have to maintain at least 90% of their employees as of March 20. Okay, it bans stock buybacks. There's no increase in executive compensation. It prohibits businesses that are controlled by the president, the cabinet, and members of Congress or their family members from benefiting. There are grants to nonprofits and businesses with 500 to 10,000 employees, and there are conditions that 90% of the workforce has got to be retained. There's no outsourcing or offshoring of jobs, and as I said, there is an inspector general specific for this effort. And by the way, because Elizabeth Warren, who put into place the Consumer Financial Benefit Corporation, was involved in putting in these protections. It requires real-time reporting, and there is no $3 billion bailout for the fossil fuel.
Good job. So Rosa, Harry said that we're backed up with some other questions.
Okay,
we're listening to Rosa DeLauro. No, thank you. This is great stuff. On Dateline New Haven, WNHH FM, Rosa's our U.S. representative, has been since 1990. Harry, what else are our listeners asking?
All right, so we have Yessi Ruiz. She's worried about part-time teachers. She wants to know what is going to be done for them, because she feels that only the full-time teachers will get the help.
No, when I was talking about the aid, as I understand it, that there is a temporary UI for part-time, self-employed, gig economy, and other workers who have been excluded from regular UI through December 31st, 2020. So it's my understanding that part-time workers will get relief.
And Rosa, is it fair to say that your office, Labor Department, City Economic Development Department, pages of the Independent, once this money is released, we're going to be answering those questions for people to know where do you find out specifically how to get that? We're not going to leave people hanging.
No, that's got to be, and I take it on ourselves in my office, etc. That's a massive undertaking, because people just, and they need to ask the questions. Where am I going to get relief for myself, for my family? And that is going to be a critically important piece, and everyone has to be all hands on deck to be able to do that.
And we will next week. Once it's released and they send down the rules, Rosa's office, the Independent City Hall, we're going to get it for you. Harry, were there other questions there?
Yeah, Honda Smith says, my concern during this pandemic is about the homeless walking the streets, not knowing if they have the COVID-19 or not what type of resource can be given to these cities to identify them, to get them off the streets, to get them help.
Yeah. Well, I'm just trying to take a look at, there is $4 billion in the bill, Harry, and you can tell this to Honda if you're listening. $4 billion for emergency solutions grants for those who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. There's $3 billion in rental assistance. There's a 120-day moratorium on evictions in properties that receive any federal assistance. And there's a 60-day foreclosure moratorium on federally backed mortgages and up to 180 days of forbearance during the emergency.
Rosa, can you step back for a second? I just realized something. This conversation is very different from the one every other interview we've ever had, and not just because it's on Zoom. Here in Blue New Haven, we're always talking about issues like, how do we get people paid leave? How do we get more aid for the homeless? How do we get real unemployment benefits, even for part-time workers, gig economies? All of a sudden, you're going back to a Washington where issues you fight to convince people about positions that you've been in the minority of, all of a sudden you got Republicans and Democrats voting 96-0 for paid leave. Besides the fact that you might feel like you're in an alternate universe, does this tell you anything about how political ideas evolve when reality intrudes?
That is a good question, but I do have to say this. I've got some very, very positive information which we are communicating to people. I've got to tell you, though, in all honesty, where I am disappointed. But we've got good pieces here. And one of them that you mentioned, I have been struggling with paid sick days and paid family leave, as you know, for a very, very long time. And what we did in the second battery of resources that we provided, in there was something partial for paid sick days and family and medical leave. And I said yes, but what was excluded there was the employees who work for employers who have more than 500 employees. And they were excluded from that. Also excluded were parents who have to care for adult children with disabilities. So what I fought for, and no changes were made in this third package on paid sick days and paid family and medical leave. So there is something there, and it's been not there actually for the very first time, which is an accomplishment, but it's not where it needs to be in terms of meeting the demands and the needs of people now who are out of work through no fault of their own, and don't know how they're going to make it paycheck to paycheck. But your point is so well taken, because we have fought for a very, very long time for these issues. And what we are finding, in my view, is the systems that we have been trying to support, buttress up, make strong, we are seeing now that they are not where they should be, like this country having paid sick policy nationally, paid family and medical leave, a child tax credit, which can help families. We have a structure in place, but it is not robust enough to be able to deal with kids who are left behind and families who have young children. So we need to continue that fight. My fight for this fourth package is for something that is robust on family and medical leave and paid sick days, and to see if we can get a child tax credit in there. And we have to make sure that they do this time. What they didn't do is to increase the amount of money for food stamps. The Republicans said no to that. Now there's $15 billion for food stamps, but we did not increase the benefit. That's where we have to go. And that's what we have to, you're right. People are beginning to believe now, to zip on this for an expanded unemployment insurance program. And we have not been able to get that for years. It's needed. It's necessary for times like this.
All right. In times like this, what better person to talk to than U.S. Representative Rosa DeLauro here, filling us in on the fight in Washington and then the effort to bring it back home for aid during the COVID-19 crisis here on Dateline New Haven, WNHH-FM. Station Manager Harry Droz is fielding your questions. I apologize we won't get to most of them, but we're going to work through some of them and give Rose a chance to answer them thoroughly. Harry, any more questions from our listeners?
Yeah, we have one from Steve Driffin. He wants to know, why is the gross amount of this money going to corporations and not to small and medium businesses?
Thank you, Steve. Nice to hear from you.
Okay. Hold on a second. For small businesses, here we go. Okay. You got $350 billion for a new paycheck protection program to assist small businesses and nonprofits. Let me give you some of the information. Small businesses, I'm glad for the question. Thank you so much, Steve, because this is important. There is money here for small businesses and nonprofits. There are forgivable loans for 8 weeks of payroll. That's up to $10 million to employers, including nonprofits, with less than 500 employees, self-employed individuals, and gig workers. There's loan forgiveness reduced if the reduction in employees or pay. Incentives for rehiring workers, $17 billion to provide relief from SBA loan payments for 6 months. $10 billion for SBA emergency grants for operating costs, up to $10,000. Deferment of 7A loan payments for 6 to 12 months, and the federal government covering 50% of unemployment compensation for nonprofits. I will tell you that the original House bill was much more generous, but this is where we are now. I commit to you that we will fight for increased and more robust packages for small business. But there is serious funding for small businesses. Now I'm going to be on a call. I believe it may even be later today with the governor, the lieutenant governor, and people from the SBA on this issue as well. So,
Harry, anything else from our listeners? Anyone else in the queue?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of comments and questions that we're not going to be able to get to, but let me give you one more from Angela Maddie. She says Bella Vista had its first confirmed COVID-19 case yesterday. Do you know what steps are being taken to protect the approximately 2,000 older and disabled folks living there? Thank you.
Yeah, listen, I've spent so much of my time at Bella Vista, and I read that with such sadness, and obviously, your heart goes out to the families, etc. And actually, we've lost 19 people. This was as of yesterday in Connecticut. So you just pray for people and for their families at this time. I want to be honest with you, Angela. I don't know all of the precautions that are being taken at Bella Vista. You're right, there are 2,000 people there. I don't know what the directives are. I want to be honest with you, but I will look into that and see what's being done so that we can get information out through the media.
And Rosa, if you don't mind, if I could just interject for a second. So Carabetta Management runs Bella Vista. They claim that they're starting robocalls with daily information. They claim that they are barring any visits to people's apartments unless it's healthcare or food. And they've also said they've increased their cleaning. I wonder, Rosa, while that's all important, if there's any alternative to people working so hard to maintain that 6 to 8 foot distance and knowing you can't really just hang out with other people right now. And who's it harder for than for seniors living by themselves and needing that contact? But we want to keep people alive.
Right. No, I listen, I've got friends. I just talked to someone this morning. One of my staff people, her parents are in a home. The son just went to the lawn just to wave to them so that they're not feeling lonely or by themselves. You got it really, if you can FaceTime with people, you can't go. You just cannot go. And it is so tough. I know that we're looking at nutrition programs, about $955 million for home community-based services, family caregivers, the nursing home to try to mitigate against the spread, $50 money for people in housing, for people with disabilities, for low-income seniors. You talked about Carabetta, and the cleaning stuff and the maintenance there is critically important. That is one of the saddest, most difficult things, because we all know that the best thing for seniors is socialization, of being with others. deals with depression and loneliness, but also cognitive ability, etc. So, you know, people though need to not be with one another. And again, one of the hardest things for seniors is not seeing grandkids, not being able to hold them, to hug them, and so forth. And so, whatever way, it really is. It's very, very tough. So,
Rosa DeLauro's answering your questions and our questions on WNHH FM, Dateline New Haven, in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis. Rosa, what are we learning from what went wrong and what went right in parts of the world where this outbreak hit first? Italy, Spain, China, now closer to home, New York. What are we going to be able to learn as New Haven now enters the crunch, the hardest part of this spread?
Well, look, it is about preparedness, Paul. And we were after the fact in terms of testing and of equipment and of really investing in our public health infrastructure, because this comes down to state and local level. And again, we're playing catch up in terms of providing the necessary funding for our public health infrastructure. As I said to you a few minutes ago, what our unemployment insurance system needs to have in order to be able to cope with such a pandemic, what our paid sick days, paid leave policies, what needs to be in place so that we can, what are the kinds of investment in our hospital structures. Now we're doing the $100 billion to our hospitals. We need to learn from this. There are a number of examples. South Korea was able to handle this in a much more prepared fashion than we have. That's not true of Italy, or Spain, or New Orleans, New York. So that the lessons to be learned from here are, where are the holes in, I don't know if you want to call it a safety net, but in these various structures that have put us in the position of having to scramble to catch up. And how are we going to, and I hope what we are going to do is not say, well, when this is over, that okay, we got through it and okay. No. Where were the holes? Where were the mistakes? And how are we going to meet the needs for the future?
Rosa, do you have any sense? I know you've been on the phone privately with the people at Yale New Haven. It's going to hit in the next week, like next days. It's now starting to double every day and more in New Haven. People starting to die. How prepared is Yale New Haven? Do we have enough beds? I know they've been working hard to get overall facilities, subacute facilities. Where do things stand? How bad does it look for the next few days?
Well, I just want to say is, are they were clamoring for the equipment, clamoring for additional beds? Are they doing every single thing that they can be doing, including advocating for what they need to have? The answer to that is yes. And I was on the phone with them last week, but they, like other parts of the country, are looking for the resources and the equipment that they need in order to be able to do their jobs and to provide the appropriate health care. And that includes the equipment, the ventilators, the masks, and trying to make sure, and I know the governor has been all over making the requests from the national stockpile of what they needed. Now we've given more money there. So as I said, the distribution has got to occur. We need to know what it is, and it's got to occur much, much more quickly.
And Rosa, if you don't mind my mentioning, while you folks are working on the big picture and the big dollar amounts, listeners can participate and lend a hand at the firehouses. They have collection areas for N95 masks. If you have any, you could donate. Make Haven has a new program where everyone's sewing masks. They don't only need the N95s. There are other protective masks that you can sew. They have the pattern up on the web that frees up the N95 mask for COVID care. That's at makehaven.org. And the Community Foundation and the United Way have teamed together to form one big community fund that is getting millions of dollars out the door today to nonprofits they work with all year. That's sort of our big pushki, as we say. So if you go to the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven website, you'll see how to participate. Rosa, before we let you go, anything else you want to mention?
On the Community Foundation, I know I've got the statements from Will Ginsburg on the making of masks. I talked yesterday to a Brantford businesswoman, unbelievably dynamic woman. She was reaching out to the Haynes Corporation and also of getting masks and gowns or whatever we need from China. So you are right. Locally, people are extending themselves beyond. Exactly, that's what we need. But I also want to say that the federal government has a responsibility to meet the need in time to doing what we need to make sure people are protected.
Well, Rosa DeLauro, thank you for being in that fight. Thank you for joining us on Dateline New Haven, folks. I'm sorry we didn't get to most of the questions, but thank you everyone who's listened and asked the questions. And I just say, Rosa, it's great to see you fired up. It's great to see you fighting as always. We're also hoping that you stay safe and you stay healthy amid this crisis while you're going down to Washington and coming back.
Thank you. You take care as well. And to all your listeners, be safe, you and your families. God bless you.
All right. So thank you for joining us today on Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM. Thank you to U.S. Representative Rosa DeLauro and her staff. Thank you to Station Manager Harry Drost, the miracle man behind the controls. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night on WNHH-FM, your home for community radio.